Hello and welcome back to AEFTV in association with Engerati. I'm joined now by Moustapha Sow, who represents the Islamic Development Bank. And Moustapha, we're talking a little bit off air. Firstly, welcome to the studio. I mentioned some of the mega trends that PwC are seeing, and one of them is investment into Africa. Now, you and your organization do a lot of work around that. And there's always this perception when investing into Africa saying this is going to be a risky business. And there is a sense that some of that is being eroded. But can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing on the ground and what work you guys are doing on that front?
Well, thank you, Adam, for having me. I mean, we've been talking about for the last, last decade that, Africa has opportunity, there are opportunities, etc. We all know that, it's becoming a routine to hear that. But now I think the challenge is, how to really make that work. People want to come invest in Africa, but we have to confront the reality. I mean, Africa, I wouldn't say is a risky. I mean, the situation is getting better, but we have a political situation that is a little bit volatile, and we know how foreign investors are really keen into that. That's the reason why, I mean, we try to with the political risk insurance program, we're trying to cover that gap, existing in Africa and then other country members, because we have a kind of South-South cooperation, so muscle countries members. I mean, the political risk is seen as investors as being something real. So, and this is the reason why, I mean, we are trying to support investment in Africa with our political risk insurance. So if you will, we do exactly what MIGA is doing, which is providing everything related to war and civil disturbance. It could go from breach of contract, with especially PPPs. They could go from nationalization, expropriation, risk of transfer, convertibility. So these are what we're trying to do on the risk.
So is that you're underwriting the risk? Is that what's happening, or?
Indeed, exactly. We underwrite the risk, and we come up with a with a tool that could allow investors to be comfortable in their equity investment. So basically what it does is just come and invest. If anything happens, don't worry about your initial investment, we reimburse you. This is one thing we do. The other thing we do also is to support, how ECA's export credit is very important into, project. Here we talk about power projects, for example. We have another hat also that support contractors, like a power projects and etc. One of the reason why we are doing this, again, like I said, Africa being a growing country, all sectors, industrialization being really here an issue here, and that's what is actually leading for that huge gap deficit, for energy. Nigeria is a good example, and we all know that, although in certain, for example, in Nigeria, in certain in this segment of the power sector, it's mainly driven by local investors, which is not the area where we want to focus. We want to focus on drawing and making sure that foreign investors are comfortable. So this is one of the main reasons why until now our institution have decided to really focus in Africa, and especially energy is now a very, very, very important sector to us.
Yeah, because it makes sense, because you're seeing a population growth in Africa.
Indeed.
You're seeing urbanization to a degree, and that brings its own
Indeed.
challenges.
Indeed.
I mean, how do you? So, I suppose it's very easy to say, "Oh, we underwrite the investment," and that's a very simple statement. But do you see that there is a will on a more macro-political level to sort of say, look, we really have to sort this out and create a more stable environment, otherwise we aren't going to get any of this stuff, no matter what good works an organization like yours does.
I mean, if you think about it, if we go back just a little bit, I mean, Africa used to be a country in which area in Africa, almost every single month you'll hear like a coup d'etat or anything like that. It has been something very, very, very common. But we have to also realize that perception is now being changed, because I'm not saying there's no coup d'etat. I'm not saying that there's no civil war.
The volume or the velocity of that news
exactly
is
reducing, because
reduced.
we are seeing now young generation. For example, if you see in many countries in Africa, newly elected president are so what we call born after independence. So their perception is very different, and the more and more we are seeing in African countries setting up, like you said, 2-term mandate. Like you stay for 5 years, an additional 5, and after that you have to go. And the more and more it has been respected. Of course, don't get me wrong. In any group at any, there will always be exception. Exactly. But no, I mean the trend is changing. People are now being more educated, and I personally think that education is the key. It's the more the population is being educated, the easier it could be. Easier it could be for them to basically say, hey, listen, this is not what we want. This is because we used to be submissive, right? And when you were educated, you tend to take your ownership, because it's at the end of the day, it's your future. When you spend a lot of money on education, a lot of time, you just want to make sure that time and money is not waste, right? And we know how influential government decision is on a population like Africa. So no, I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, investment in Africa is some investors are being now more comfortable, but like I said, we have to face the reality and say, hey, listen, there is a gap, there is a comfort, so to speak. We need to walk them through. That's the reason why, in fact, if you've seen back in the day, people used to take, for a political risk insurance a longer term. But now people are taking more and more shorter term, right? Because they just want to make sure that, by the time they just get a good return on equity, basically, just make sure that investment is safe. Not really necessary to take the same duration of the contract, which could be sometime 20, 25 years. Here, what we see often with people will come, they say, I just need to secure my investment for like 5 years. And I think this is something that could explain, like I just said, that trend. And yeah, we are willing to be there and then support that.
Well, you raise a very interesting point, which is that social point, where, and again, there are more and more reports and documentaries about the level of education, and not just the level of education in isolated pockets, but far-fetched, and these kids want different things, out of life, and that has to be a great push towards the sort of, when I see those great pictures of. Kids, and this is not just an African thing, this is also in the rural villages in India and things like that, playing around with tablets and stuff like that. Pretty soon they're going to say, hang on, I want to be charging this the whole time, and things like that. It creates a whole different DNA into the demand.
No, absolutely. If I think I myself is a great example. I mean, I used to live in Canada where I was working. I came back to Africa a couple of years ago, right? And one of the main reasons why I'm back to Africa is at a certain point there is this self-consciousness, which was telling me, hey, Moustapha, listen, you are lucky, you have this good education, etc. Why would you not go back to your country and just make sure that things will change, right? Sometimes people will tell you, yeah, but it will be very difficult. You cannot change anything. But honestly, I mean, there is an initiator, in any change, right? Change is very difficult in an environment. But like I said, if I come in and I bring my piece on the puzzle, another one will come. I mean, at the end of the day, we will get there, right? And similar thing happening in all of the countries, or more and more you are seeing people, yes, indeed, go up to UK, to the US, or in Paris, or whatever, have good education. But usually they tend to go back, to really participate to what I would call, that big change actually happening in Africa.
And it must be so exciting as well, because when you see potential, I mean, when you live in Canada, the UK, and everything, yes, there's potential, but the potential is almost incremental, isn't it? Whereas I would imagine the potential here is, there are these great leaps that could be made, and that must be a very exciting thing for you personally.
No, absolutely. Listen, I mean, I think we've learned a great lesson about history. I mean, there was a time after World War II, but it was the U.S. rising. Before the World War, there was Europe rising, and then after you see the U.S. rising, and after you see the Asia country rise. Now everybody are agreed that it's a time for Africa to shine, right?
Sure.
But that shining, it shouldn't be just a talk and a written. For me, for the past few years, it has been more on the saying ground and the doing ground.
Yeah.
And I think it's a time for now to execute, which is the most difficult part in any project, any development, any movement.
Getting it done.
Get it done. I think that's my message. Yeah. I mean, we need to really make sure that implementation.
If I could give you right, you're now in charge, right? And what is the thing that you feel needs to get done, like yesterday, that can really push things, and it may be something that's already being done, but I think what I'd like to do from you is get a sense of the positivity that's coming out of, certainly discussions I've had here as well.
I mean, what I want to just emphasize here is on the terms of positivity. There are great models, for example, in Africa that they could. Let me tell you, Rwanda. I've been traveling quite extensively in different African countries, but with the great learning curve aspect. Rwanda is, for example, a country that dazzled me. They don't have nothing, no natural resources, but the education part of people, and then having a leadership. Our major issue in Africa is the leadership issues. I mean, we have to, face the reality and say it. It's all about institution. Everybody talks about institutions, good institution or good leaders. To the chicken and the eggs.
Yes.
But for me, it starts by great leaders. I mean, we're in Turkey. Ataturk, everybody knows that what he does. I mean, you need that leader that could just make sure that institution gets stronger. And the the transmission goes smoothly. I mean, we are lucky, for example, in Senegal, we have a similar model, and in other countries, so to speak. But I think the challenge is really to have a leadership that could really walk us through really where we're going to get there. I think this is the major challenge that Africa is facing right now.
And then not once that's in place, I mean, I think I get a sense it's all happening at the same time, because foreign investors are looking at Africa as an opportunity as well. And just as we're coming to the end of our time, and the final question to you is, where do you see the most investment going into Africa at the moment? Because again, what I get a sense of is that the sort of southern part of Africa is getting the lion's share of the talk, and I don't mean South Africa with that. I mean, that region, and that there is this swathe in the middle where, and again, this may be naive, so please correct me, where there's not that much going on, where there could be more of an impetus.
I think in terms of investment flow in Africa, I think the three major sectors will be agriculture. Not even even if the three, I will put it on the last. But I think energy, infrastructure, and agriculture. They are the three. I mean, independently. Like for example, if you take Nigeria, who is now becoming the #1 economy, their major issue is energy. So that obviously, investors coming in, there's a huge opportunity in this. So yes, indeed, energy is, I would say for me, is the primary, and I mean, it's critical. If you invest in agriculture and you don't have the energy to transform, to industrial, I mean, it's not gonna fly. Infrastructure, the same thing. We need energy. So I mean, I could understand the role that energy is playing there, but no, I mean. Yes, indeed, energy is actually a very, 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 in terms of investment flow, is a very representative sector for investment coming to Africa.
Good. Thank you very much for your time. I've enjoyed talking to you in the midst of all the tannoys, so you can tell we're doing this live, and that was a particularly bad one. So I hope you enjoyed the interview, and thank you as well for watching.
Thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you. Thanks.